Alright, we're starting this series of videos rating all the cards for all the colors from Unleashed. The first video is going to be all blue. So we start with Downstage Dramatics, 2 energy, reaction, repeat 2, draw 1. So obviously made for Jhin. He's even on the artwork, so that's nice. But I don't think that it's going to replace Consult the Past, for example, or Progress Day, most likely even in a Jhin deck. So I think even though it's playable, I don't think it's going to be overtaking any other options that we already have. And if you play any combinations of other colors, like maybe like in the future if orange and blue are gonna be played together, then maybe Downstage Dramatics will find space there. But for now I feel like it's not gonna find a lot of options. That we have much better cards already in the game that are fitting better, I would say, even though I do think Downstage Dramatics has an upside of being flexible, just being used as a cycle for 2, right? That's the biggest upside of Downstage Dramatics. So I'm just giving it 3 beavers. That's gonna be what I'm gonna be giving out today. So beavers, from 1 to 6 beavers, we're gonna give it 3 beavers because it's a playable card, but nothing special. It can be played, but it doesn't have to be. Maybe it depends a little bit of your playstyle as well. So I'm giving it 3 out of 6 beavers. Let me know in the comments which color would you like to see evaluated tomorrow for the next video. Dramatic Visionary gets a 1 beaver rating from me, but remember that I am rating cards here from a perspective of a 1v1 competitive player, right? So Dramatic Visionary is obviously first and foremost designed for limited play in Draft and Sealed, but I do think if someone wants to do a miracle deck in blue and purple and play both Nocturnes and then the blue Jhins that are for 4 energy that we're going to talk about later on, then maybe Dramatic Visionary could actually be found there. But other than that, it's a 1 beaver limited kind of card. Next we have Eclipse, 3 energy, reaction, gives a unit -4 might this turn with no minimum, very important, and has a predict built in. Now we can draw a comparison to Smokescreen, obviously, which is basically the same card but different. So 2 energy, 1 power, has -4 but minimum 1 and doesn't have a predict. Both are reaction, and now it depends. Like I feel like in Kai'Sa, you never want to play Eclipse because Kai'Sa overrides the power cost, right? And now it's able to actually squeeze in the Smokescreen in a way more flexible manner to their own mana curve, while Eclipse doesn't necessarily allow you to do that. 3 is very costly. In many like games, the reality is that having a 3 open, it's very easy to play around, and also like not easy to squeeze in. Right? You're gonna have most likely like 1 or 2 open in many cases. And when it comes to Diana, obviously this is card like designed for Diana, right? But at the same time, I'm not certain if you would play that even in Diana over the Smokescreen. Because the thing is, again, Diana has a way of adding energy instead of like recuperating the cost of the power, right? So even though you take that into the consideration and then Eclipse essentially costs you 2 instead of 3, which is better than Smokescreen in this case, but the tempo might be more important in decks that are just based upon like getting value from cards like from reaction spells like this, right? So you might even be more inclined to use cheaper spells than Eclipse, and in this case Smokescreen could be more enticing for a Diana player than the actual Eclipse. Now I do think Predict has value in it, and I think that's actually pretty important in decks that did lose, like Cold Shot, for example, right? But overall, it's hard for me to say if this is better than Smokescreen or not. I think it depends on the metagame and the playstyle of the decks, but I do think it's a playable card. So I'm giving it 3 beavers out of 6. It's not bad. It's not terrible. It's actually playable, but it's not super duper great. Like it doesn't fit in most decks or something like that, right? So I think it's fine. I think it's a good card. Next we have Fate Weaver, 5 energy, 4 might unit. When you play me, look at the top 4 cards of your main deck. You may reveal a spell with energy cost 4 or more from among them and draw it. Recycle the rest. Now, it's an expensive card. It's underrated, right? Because you have 4 might for 5 power. It doesn't cost you, sorry, might. It doesn't cost you power, which is nice. So now you can just slam it like on turn 2 when you're going second, and that's not terrible, but it still has a problem of like being pretty underpowered. Now, I do think I'm gonna say a very similar thing to what I said about the Visionary. This could be played in a blue-purple deck with Nocturnes and the Jhins, right? Because then it kind of fits that. It can enable the Nocturnes. It can also draw you the spells to play actual Jhins for free as well. So you can now suddenly go like tempo play, right? But for now, that should have been like the combination blue and purple is essentially Teemo or Diana or Ezreal, right? I don't know if any of those particular decks would like to go for like the blue purple Nocturne Jhin build. Maybe that's something we're gonna have to like see in the future. But I feel like this card could only see play in that deck, and that's about it. Like, I think I'm just gonna give it one beaver because I don't see it being played otherwise, right? It could be played in sealed, and this would be actually pretty playable card if it didn't have a restraint or like, you know, requirement for the cost on the spell. If this would be like any spell, then I think this would be actually pretty cool. But unfortunately it's not, so it's only 4 or more. So in this case I'm giving it one beaver because it's overcosted and the effect is very limited. Next we have Icevale Archer. It's 2 energy, 2 might. When I attack, you may pay 1 to give a unit here -1 this turn. Now, there are so many good 2-drops that you typically don't have the space for that. There would have to be some major synergy with giving -might to actually for this to matter. And it's also pretty hard to like actually have this to matter because it would require you to go second. You would have to spend energy, right? So your opponent would have to then go into the side with a 2-drop that has like 2 might and be affected by the Icevale Archer. So in many cases you could compare this to like Poro with Assault, right? Poro with Assault essentially have the same effect, almost the same effect, but doesn't have to pay because it's when I attack I have +1 might, which is mathematically almost the same, right? In many cases this one would actually matter for like removal, like if you have like a Hextech Ray. So now Icevale Archer has this Stupefy built in without actually playing a Stupefy and destroys a unit. But I think in many cases you either don't have a slot for a 2-drop like this, or at least for now, and in many cases it's just, even if you would like to play this, so you will not have the mana to actually use it, the energy, right? So I'm giving it one beaver. Not the best card, and you have many other slots that would be filled with other 2-drops in blue, right? Or any other color that you have the blue combination with, unless, as I say, there's gonna be a new card and new expansions that have like some major synergy with giving you -might every time, like whenever you do it or something like that. Next we have a spell, Moonlight Affliction, a 7 energy spell reaction, give a unit -10 might this turn with no minimum. I mean, it's pretty massive spell, I'll be honest with you. But who the hell wants to squeeze this in? I don't see a way of actually using this card in any competitive deck right now, not even a sideboard choice. I'm just giving it one beaver, one bober, if you're Polish, one bubr. So one beaver to Moonlight Affliction, because even though like it's for sure a sealed card, right? But if you play any kind of deck that plays blue, if you play blue and yellow, for example, you're gonna just use hard removal instead. If you're gonna play blue and purple, you have other options that are just straight up better, right? Like, you're not gonna play Watchers and Moonlight Affliction in the same deck, most likely. And again, this card would probably be maybe, you know, consideration if there would be some very valid synergy for giving -might, but for now we don't really have that. I don't even know what would be the payoff for something like that. It's just basically just a big discipline, right? It's just reverse discipline for you, but without drawing a card. So it's like, I don't know, pretty bad. One beaver. Next one we have Ruined Rex, which is a 6 energy, 1 blue power, 6 might, Death Knell, deal 4 damage to an enemy unit. Everywhere. Can be in base, can be on any battlefield, right? It does not have a limitation, which is fantastic. And I feel like Ruined Rex is not gonna see much play outside of Limited and Leblanc, right? Because in Leblanc, he can shine very, very much. And in Leblanc, it's even gonna be better than 4 beavers, but I feel like I'm gonna give it 4 beavers because it's probably only gonna be playable in one particular deck. Because otherwise the other Riptide Rex is probably gonna be more playable in case, because it affects just the battlefield when it enters, right? And Death Knell would only be reasonably used in LeBlanc for now, at least. I think so. So I don't think it's a bad card. I actually think it's more than playable. The stats are on par. Like, it's still a 6-drop, but in LeBlanc it shines. So I'm just gonna give it 4 beavers out of 6. It's not fantastic, but in LeBlanc can literally just nuke almost everything, right? Because you can make copies of it if you Karthus this. I'm not sure if LeBlanc is gonna even use Karthus. Like, for now, it seems like Karthus is gonna be a major player in the LeBlanc deck, and then Ruined Rex just deals 8 to anything that is in base. Like, that's insane, right? And overall, still, I would consider it, even Karthus, without Karthus, I would consider this a playable card in LeBlanc, so I'm giving it 4 out of 6. Next we have Spectral Centaur, which is a 6 energy 5 might with no power cost. When another friendly unit dies, give me +2 might this turn. Now obviously this is made for temporary units, right? You want to play this in Lillia, for example, and then whenever you start the turn and your temporary units die, you get a buff, right? Or you attack with the temporary units into the battlefield, they die, and you buff the Spectral Centaur. But the problem is just so slow. 6 energy for an underpowered unit like this. This guy could be a 7 might and would probably not see play. Like, I don't think this is good at all. I mean, maybe 6 at 7. Maybe that would be then a little bit... maybe in Lillia would be a consideration then, if it would have 7 might. Maybe, but probably still not, because that's just not good. This would be much better if this would be a cheap creature with even 0 might. Like if this would be like a 2-drop with 0 might and would get like +3 for every death, that would be probably a consideration to some degree, right? Or maybe it would be like just a weird weird student. It's a 2/2 and that gets +2 might whenever a unit dies. Maybe then, but in this case, it's pretty bad. It's a sealed and limited card of play card, and I'm gonna give it 1 beaver because of that. Next we have Sprite Burst, a 5 energy spell. Play 2 ready sprite unit tokens with temporary. Both of them have 3 might. Now, I think this is playable. I'm just gonna give it 4 beavers. This is pretty okay. I would not... I played a lot of Lillia so far in my Unleashed career, and so far, I don't feel like I would use this as a free-off in a Lillia deck, because it's a little bit of an overkill. You already have means of creating sprites before. You have the Sprite Fountain, you have Sprite Modders, which I think are very playable in Lillia still. You have the ability to do it from your legend hero power as well. And Sprite Burst, the biggest upside of Sprite Burst is the fact that it makes your legend power cheaper, right? Because with a Sprite Burst, now you can use your Blossom legend power for 2, because it gets 2 cheaper, right? So now for 7, you actually have 3 sprites. Now that's pretty decent. So I would not play this. Essentially, this card is not a 5-drop, but it's more like a 7-drop because of that. And that has a competition with other cards in this deck, right? It is more flexible because if you need it, you can use it for 5. But I don't think it's like it's such a big consideration, right? Maybe, for example, if you would do unchecked power at maximum energy, unchecked power into Sprite Burst, that would be pretty neat, right? Because then maybe you can actually able to conquer both battlefields at the same time. But you typically set that up with just 1 battlefield and a hold, for example. So it's like... I feel like it's a playable card. I think it's not going to be a 3-off in Lillia, but probably like a 1-off or 2-off, and it's a playable card, so I'm giving it 4 beavers, because that's just better cards for the Lillia deck. Next, we have Turn to Dust, a 2 energy spell that gives a gear temporary. So essentially, it kills it at the beginning of the next beginning phase, right? And here, you can see I already gave it a rating, and it's 6 gears. So in this video, in this cycle, I would say, of videos, I'm going to be giving out 1 score for main decks, and then the gears for sideboard cards. And in this case, I'm giving it 6 gears because it's a tech card that you're going to be having in the sideboard. And I feel like blue was really missing a card like this. And because if you play like blue-red, you're gonna have Thermal Beam, right? But Thermal Beam also affects your own cards. So maybe it would not be a consideration in every single deck that plays also blue, right? Because if you play anything like in a Kaisa, that would be pretty decent for you in some matches. Like, for example, if you would like to play Assembler Rig, right? Maybe that's not the best choice to just do a Thermal. But then Turns to Dust also gives you the ability to destroy gear without affecting your own gears. Or if you play Seals, for example, right? So there's also a very big change to rulings, because Turn to Dust can be now used on any attached gear. And by the way, that's the reason why this card I think is playable to that degree in sideboards, because otherwise it could not be used on gear that's attached to someone. Because temporary, if it would be like before the rule change, did not work on a gear that is attached to something else, because then that text is not active. But right now, the gear actually has that temporary active even when attached to someone, so you can still destroy an equipment that is on a unit, which is very important change. And because of this, I'm giving it 6 gears, and it's a fantastic choice for sideboards for blue that do not want to play Thermal Beam for some reason, because it would be like affecting them themselves, or they don't play that many red, or they play, you know, maybe a different combination of colors and want to still have a very cheap card that can deal, like, for example, with Auroras, right? So yeah, great sideboard card. Next we have Chakram Dancer. I'm already giving it 2 beavers, by the way. 3 energy, 3 might, has an ambush. When you play me, give your auto units here shield this turn. So it's an ambush, but you only want to use it on defense, essentially, right? But it can still be used on attack, I guess. But the problem is that it only gives an effect when you're defending, right? So then you have to count it this way. I play a free drop that has 3 might. That's on par with the amount of energy spent. If I would like to gain much more than that, then I would have to depend on auto units that I have in the battlefield. If I have 2 auto units, I'm paying 3 energy for 5 might. But we have to remember that shield is split as well towards the other 2 units. And you have to get 2 auto units, right? So if those units have shield and tank, then maybe that's worth it. But other than that, it's really not that great of a card. It is playable, but I don't think it's great. And if you play like blue and green, for example, then you would prefer to have for Janna. Janna, I know she costs a power, but the effect is just so much more powerful and so much more potent, right? Because you can just essentially fight or flight a unit, and your opponent at least, right? But it can also counter like any damage that was being dealt to your units, that it might actually matter much more than just Chakram Dancer. Now, also, 3 drops are so congested in the way that you build your deck that it's so hard to squeeze it in. So this Chakram Dancer is actually way closer to a 1 beaver than 2 beavers, but it is possible to play this in some type of deck, but I don't think it's easy to play because it will require you to have so many units, right? Next we have Crescent Strike. It's a 3 energy, 1 blue power action. Choose a battlefield and an enemy unit there. Deal 4 damage to that unit and then 1 to each other enemy unit there. Now, we can make a direct comparison to like Void Seeker. Void Seeker has the same energy. It's a red cost instead of blue cost. It's also an action. It deals 4 damage to a unit, but instead of dealing the 1 damage on the other units in the battlefield, it draws you a card, right? And Void Seeker doesn't see any play, even though it has a very powerful cantrip effect, right? And if we would play Kai'Sa, for example, let's keep it like red-blue for this example, I feel like I would probably never play Crescent Strike instead of Void Seeker, even if I would like to play a 3-drop removal like this, because this kind of makes sense to play against decks like Victor. But against a deck like Victor, I don't think I'm gonna be struggling because I'm gonna have other options, like for example, Ikafian Rain, or if I play Kai'Sa, of course, and if I don't even play Kai'Sa but like Jhin, then maybe I will just use Bellows Breath, because Bellows Breath is also so potent with Watchers, and this is much harder to squeeze with Watchers. So like, why would I play that, right? Would I play that in blue and purple, for example? Probably not, because then again, I have the options of already playing like Bellows Breath, which is more flexible and has better synergy with Ezreal Prodigy, right? So I'm not certain I like this card at all. The only thing that I would see this maybe play would be a Lillia, and Lillia because she doesn't have an answer to a Vex, right? So in Lillia, which is blue and green, and if your opponent goes like Mutated Mauser, goes to a battlefield, and then plays out Vex, and they tap out because it's turn 2, and you could play Crescent Strike, deramp by 2, you would have to play blue and something else, right? Because of the deflect cost on Vex. But then you would be able to kill the Vex and the Mutated Mauser with 1 card. And I feel like that's the best possible scenario that Lillia could maybe like do in that particular thing. But then if your opponent learns that that's a possibility and he will just play Vex maybe later on instead and keep some mana open, right? Then you can't really do that anymore. So Crescent Strike, I feel like can be only played because of that reason, only in Lillia for now, but also as a sideboard card. So it is playable, but I'm giving it 2 beavers because otherwise, like, I don't see any reason to play it over auto removal that we have currently in the game, but maybe I'm missing something. So if you know something that would be making this card more playable than 2 beavers, let me know. Next, we have Deadly Flourish. 4 energy, deal 3 to an enemy unit. When it dies this turn, play a Gold Gear token exhausted. Now, again, a spell designed for Jhin. But Jhin can already play cards like, for example, Rocket Barrage. And I know Rocket Barrage has a power cost. This one doesn't, right? So that's an upside for Deadly Flourish. But Rocket Barrage can actually have like the flexibility of also killing gears, right? I know it only deals damage to base, But like the biggest upside of Deadly Flourish is actually dealing damage to base. Like if it deals damage to battlefield, 4 for free to battlefield is not a good deal, right? So I don't want to play that for that particular reason, and the flexibility to deal damage to base only then affects cards like, for example, Ezreal Prodigy, because that's a target that I would like to kill, or maybe Karthus, right? And if I'm spending 4 energy to kill a Karthus or Ezreal Prodigy, that's not the best deal. Typically, we'd like to have a tempo advantage, like using Falling Stars, for example, right? If you play a Jhin, then blue-red is possible to play, you know, the Falling Stars, even though you're not trying to play like smaller spells than 4. But you could still do that because it's just more efficient. So I have hard time really thinking that the Flourish is going to be played. So I'm going to give it a 1 beaver because I feel like it's probably unplayable. Next, we have Frigid Jewel, a 2 energy gear. When you draw your second card each turn, give a friendly unit +2 might this turn. Now, I think this card is pretty much playable. So I'm going to tell you that already I'm giving it 4 beavers, and I'll explain you why. Because I think, first and foremost, this gear can be played on turn 1, right? Without a power cost, this actually matters a lot. We could try to maybe compare it to Heart of Dark Eyes, which is a pretty decent card, but it costs you 3 energy and a power cost, a green one, right? So you don't want to play that early game, and in this case of Frigid Jewel, you can play that on turn 1 and you don't really care, right? You might miss on the drop, but maybe if you play a deck like this, maybe it doesn't matter. So it's not a big problem that you actually sacrifice a turn 1 to play a Frigid Jewel. Frigid Jewel is pretty easy to trigger for decks like, for example, Ezreal, right? Because you have a way built in to draw a second card during your turn with your legend. But also, if you're able to draw multiple cards during your opponent's turn, suddenly Frigid Jewel also has value there. When you have the flexibility of affecting both turns, I think the card becomes way more way more playable. Heart of Dark Eyes only works on your turn, right? So that's like a pretty big difference. And because we have so many ways of drawing 2 cards, like for example, Console of the Past cost us 0 energy. If we can pay 1 power to essentially turn our card draw into a semi-discipline, right? It's kind of the same, like it's a build your own discipline to some degree. Then I feel like Frigid Jewel actually matters because those cards like this, Frigid Jewel, would have very small effect if the deck would not draw you a lot of cards. But then you also lose slots to play Frigid Jewel. I mean, it's kind of obvious, but what I'm trying to tell you is that in a deck that plays Frigid Jewel, you're going to have the resources to actually have the effect and still have cards that will do something else. So you gain tempo because of that. And you lose the initial tempo because you have to play Frigid Jewel, but you gain it potentially later on, and you are not lower on resources on card advantage, so you're able to fight your way back in. So I'm thinking this is playable, and you could play multiple copies of it, and then the effect is even stronger, right? So any 2-drop now suddenly becomes like 6 might, for example, during your opponent's turn. It can also dodge you a removal, right? Because you can have this as a reaction if you have a card draw that is a reaction and not just like, you know, not just like an action speed card draw. But remember that, for example, Stack Deck doesn't actually work with Frigid Jewel because you're putting a card, not drawing a card. So that's also a difference there, right? So you have to think about the particular wording that is required for Frigid Jewel to work. All right, next one is Gustwalker. It's a 1 beaver. Like, guys, I'm sorry, but all of the cycle of the dogs, they're pretty bad cards. Like, it's a 3 energy for 3 might, but it has a power cost. It does have the hunt keyword, right? But think about it this way. When you reach level 3, you get the might, which is gonna be like over, like not even over, it's gonna be costed similarly. Like when you play a 3 energy card that costs you might, you probably would like to have at least 4 might on it, right? But it only gets to that when you have level 3, and you don't want to play this like early game because it costs you power. So if you play this when you go second and you play a Gustwalker, that's probably gonna cost you like 6 energy over the course of the entire game. That is not worth it, right? This is not a big enough effect to actually warrant this kind of payoff, because the payoff is essentially, oh, I get hunt too, and maybe ganking at some point, you know? So it's like, it's not easy to do. And it's also like, I don't even see a particular blue experience deck being played right now. But even if there would be one, I would not want to play this because of the power cost. And I'll have a similar opinion about all the dogs that are gonna be in all the colors, but this one is particularly bad. So 1 beaver, not even a dog. All right, next one is Petal Pixie. It's a 2 energy, 2 might. I have +1 might for each of your units with temporary at my battlefield, not even anywhere, at my battlefield. So I'm giving it 1 beaver, and I'm not going to spend too much time on this card because it's obviously not very good. But if it would have anywhere, then maybe we could consider play Petal Pixie, but without that, it's like, it's very hard to get value. It's like, what, you break the battlefield, even if you give it like +3 or something, that means that you have to play with 3 other sprites most likely, right? So what would we do that to ourselves? And if we play Leblanc, we just have so many better cards to copy than this, right? Like in Leblanc, let's say we play this in Leblanc over any of the other 2 drops that are just so much better. Then we go into the battlefield, we make a copy of Petal Pixie, suddenly both pixies are 3 might, right? We have something else that is a copy as well, like maybe we just insta-copy like with Blue Leblanc, and those temporary units are there. I'm actually not even certain if that would work, because we will have to check. One moment. Let's say Leblanc, would that work with the blue one? Your temporary effects on my weapon don't trigger. Okay, so that would work, because now you would be able to play like multiple copies of the blue Leblanc there, and then every single Petal Pixie gets +1 for each temporary. And that is like the biggest setup you can do. And maybe then Petal Pixie will be like 5 might, and then will be 8 might, and then 11, and so on. But that's not worth it, because you have just so many more playable units at the... Dude, I am talking way too much about Petal Pixie for no reason. 1 beaver, 1 beaver. Oh my god, blue is not getting many good cards, is it? No? Soul Shepherd, 5 energy, 3 might. Your token units have +1 might. Not even every unit, just token units. So this gets a 1 beaver. Like, holy moly, this is really rough to play. Even when you play this in a Lillia deck, right? Or like, I don't know, Victor Vanguard Armory. Like, this +1 might will not change. And it's on a unit that gets Falling Start. Like, no, don't, no, nope. Next, 1 beaver. Now we're talking. First 5 beaver of this video. Sprite Fountain is a 2 energy card with gear with a blue power cost. Has temporary built in on the gear, and when you play this, play a ready 3 might sprite unit token with temporary to your base. And when it death knelled, repeat this gear's play effect. So essentially, for measly investment of 2 energy and 1 power, you're going to be playing 2 sprites back-to-back turns. And I think this effect alone makes it very good. In Lillia, this is obviously even better. In Lillia, for example, what you can do is you can set up a turn when you go unchecked power, Sprite Fountain. That's great. For 9 resources, you're setting up probably a point, and then you have tempo on the next turn as well, because you create another sprite. But now, when you consider that also a possibility to hide a card, then you can do, let's say we're at 6 points. We do unchecked power, we clear everything, we play Sprite Fountain, our sprite goes to the battlefield, gets the 7 point. Now we hide a sprite call on that battlefield, so when the temporary triggers, we answer with the sprite call, and we get the point for holding with our temporary unit that we just spawned, which can set up a win. That's not a single other deck, I think, can do anything resembling that kind of play. And it's kind of like a win condition. And I know you don't have to, like, you know, a way to pull this off every time, but it is a possibility. And Sprite Fountain, because it's so cheap, it allows you to be flexible in the way that you use it. And the split of tempo that you get, because you have back-to-back turns effect, actually makes it really awesome. And if an opponent destroys it, you can still play this unit, right? And unfortunately, it's to the base, but, you know, okay, that's meaningless. Anyway, my point is, this is a very good card. It's an uncommon. We're giving it 5 beavers. This is very good. Not only in Lillia decks, this would be even better if this would be like a spell and it would have different wording, because then Kaisa would definitely like to play this. But this could still be played in Kaisas as just like a mean of having some aggressive units for cheap. So you can squeeze that in with, for example, Darius, right? Darius with Sprite Fountain, that is a great, like, absolutely, like, you know, back-breaking battlefield opener, right? It's 10 might for 7 energy, for example. And then 3 more in the next turn. Next, we have a Diana, and we give it 5 beavers as well. Blue is eating good for the past 2 cards. Diana is a free energy, free might. When a showdown begins here, you may pay 1 energy. If you do, predict, then reveal the top card of your main deck. If it's a spell, draw it. it's pretty consistent draw mechanic, right? Because you're gonna be able to more consistently hit it because of the predict, which is awesome. It's also a champion unit for Diana, and that's probably why I raised the beaver scale by a lot, because having an option to play a champion unit with no power and also as a turn 1 play when you're going second. I mean, now like it's a little bit less powerful because of no obelisk of power, but overall, Diana allows you to be pretty aggressive, very flexible, can deliver card advantage, and in a Diana deck, remember we get 1 energy for free every single combat, so I'm giving Diana like 5 beavers because she is just doing so many things at once, and in a Diana deck, she can still win combats even though as a free drop, you will play a lot of spells that will help her combat, right? So the biggest problem here is that if you face a red color, she can be killed by a Falling Star or a Piercing Light, and that is a real threat. But other than that, I feel like any deck that has a free drop champion unit instantly becomes way more playable. The same goes for 4-cost champion unit without any power cost, right? That's the entire point. If you don't have to pay power for this, this is really fantastic and enables a deck. So for me, Diana gets a 5 beaver review because she has so many effects that will actually be impactful during the game. And you have to remember that this triggers at open showdowns as well. So when you're going second, you play Diana turn 1, then on turn 2, when you have 5 energy, you're going to be able to go to the open battlefield and then trigger this as well, which will allow you to be more efficient with your card draw potentially, right? Or like setting up your potential turns with the predict at least, even if you don't draw it, right? So this is really impactful effect, and it gets triggered every single time a showdown begins. So if your opponent goes with a creature every time, like 1 by 1, you will have the chance to use this energy every single time as well. So you can draw multiple cards during 1 turn. Next is Hwei. It's a 5 drop with 1 power cost, 5 might. When I move, draw 1, then discard 1, then do the following based on the discarded card's type. I think this is a reflexive trigger, by the way, because of the wording then. Spell, draw 1. If you discard a gear already up to 2 runes, or if you discard a unit, give me +3 might. So the overall best effect here, in most cases, is gonna be draw 1 if you discarded a spell. So naturally, this kinda would slot in a deck like Irelia, for example. But in Irelia, you don't really need cards like this, because we already have a 5 drop that is just so much better than anything else in that potential in that deck, which is just the Irelia Fervent, and she doesn't even cost a power, right? And she has built-in deflect. That is so important. For the card draw, you also have Stellarcorn. So like you don't have to jump through hoops to actually draw cards, and Hwei needs to. And I understand it's different color, but also Stellarcorn is for 4 might. Sorry, it's for 4 energy and has 3 might, but no power cost, and it's unconditional, right? So why on earth would I play Hwei then if I have Stellarcorn? So maybe I would play this in a blue-purple deck, and I would play, like, for example, flashes, and then the deck would be mostly spells, so I can actually draw cards instead of just discarding them and cycling through them, right? So maybe there's the space, but then the power cost is a problem. So you can see, like, how difficult it is to make this work for a deck, and I feel like in many cases, if you play green, you'd never play that over the Stellarcorn, so it is hard to get value out of this for now. And because of that, 2 beavers. Next, we have Keeper of Masks, 2 energy, 1 might. Hidden, has temporary as well. When you play me, play 2 reflection unit tokens here. They become copies of me. Now, I'm giving it 2 beavers, even though probably you should have 1 beaver, because there is some small synergy already, and potentially we could have more synergy at play later on. Those kind of cards are like awesome when sacrificed, for example, right? Like right now, one of the plays would be, for example, Ledros. If we play Ledros, he's gonna be able to sacrifice the units and make himself cheaper, which is pretty nice, but the question is how important that is. Now, other option here would be Lillia. Lillia, the green one, gives your token units +1 might and gives them tank. Now that's pretty sweet. So now when you consider that, we can play Green Lillia. Green Lillia goes on the battlefield. We hide Keeper of the Masks. And because we play Keeper of the Mask during an attack, now suddenly we have +4 might with tanks. Now that's decent. Our Keeper of the Mask himself will not get +1 because he is not a token, right? But his copies will, which is awesome. And in this case, that is a lot of math, like a lot of value for just 1 power, right? Because typically you would say like a hidden card will get you like +3, maybe +2. But in case of Keeper of the Mask, you get +4. So for Lillia, for the green one, of course, that could matter. Also, Keeper of the Mask could be played in your turn and instantly make your legend hero power only cost 1 energy. So there are some small synergies over here. I would not play it most likely, even in a Lillia deck, because there's not enough payoff to justify playing Keeper of the Masks, unless you can convince me. But in my Lillia deck, I didn't have this card at all. But in the future, when we potentially get maybe some more options on how to utilize like mass units, maybe to sacrifice for different effects or so, maybe that will actually matter. But right now, like, you know, there's this 2-drop that I talked about that I gave it 1 beaver already, the Pixie thing, right? She would get +3 might when you play this. Woo! That's awesome, man. Alright, next we have Lillia Hwei Fountain. She's 3 energy, 3 might, no power cost. Has accelerate, and when I move from a location, play a 3 might sprite unit token with temporary there. Now, I was thinking that maybe there's a errata needed for this card, but I think it just works how it reads. Which essentially means she moves from point A to B, she leaves the sprite on point A, on the starting point. Right? So she leaves like a poop stain, essentially, after moving. And because of that, she is definitely way less powerful than you would ordinarily think. But at the same time, if she would work the way that when she spawns a unit to attack, then she would be way too powerful, right? Because then you would be able to pay 4 energy and 1 power to create 6 attack. Now that's kind of crazy, right? So yeah, you can accelerate like in reverse. Like you could accelerate from a battlefield to base and then leave a 3 sprite might on the battlefield. There are some synergies over here, but that's not even important. Like it is a little bit clunky, but the thing is that it does play as a 3 might unit with no power cost from your hand, essentially, right? When you go second. So you're not required when you're going second to play 2-drops if you want to play in Lillia, right? Which can alter your sideboard choices, for example, when you're going second, which is very important. Maybe you will just, you know, there's no obelisk of power anymore, but it still has accelerate built in. So it is potentially like played as a unit on turn 2 if you want to go over something and your curve doesn't matter that much, or you're playing early Seal of Insight, for example, and that will eat the cost, right? So there are ways of using this as going first on turn 2 as well, which can matter, right? So there's a lot of synergy here with Lillia, and the most important aspect is the no power cost, because that allows you to play your deck differently and build your deck differently completely. So, and to keep consistency, I'm giving it 5 beavers. I mean, that's not the criteria anyway, but 5 beavers for a card that is a champion unit, playable champion unit with no power cost. That early is actually pretty significant. So yeah, obviously this 5 beaver is only for the Lillia decks, but it could be played in other blue decks as well, in case you have some synergy with like sacrificing units, or you're, for example, a Leblanc deck. You could maybe do that because you could sacrifice like your sprites, you know, I don't know. Anyway, it is a good card. So now we have a card that works directly with the Lillia that I just spoke of, Smoke and Mirrors. It's a 2 energy hidden card or an action card from hand. Choose a unit you control and another unit you control at a different location. If at least one of them has temporary, you can move each to the other's location. Draw 1. I'm giving it 2 beavers. If it didn't have the draw cantrip, I would have given it 0 beavers. Like, it's not really a good card. It has small cute synergy with the Lillia, right? Because now you're gonna be able to like go with the Lillia to a battlefield, leave a temporary unit at your base. Then you can hide Smoke and Mirrors, play the Smoke and Mirrors, swap the Lillia with the sprite in your base, spawn another sprite on your battlefield, and now you suddenly have a 6 might unit, I mean, form of 2 units, on the battlefield, and you kinda try to save your Lillia. Now, the problem is, that is still expensive. It draws your card with the cantrip, thank God, right? But it's like, does that win you games? Does that build you like enough tempo to actually warrant it being used over anything else in the deck? And I think the answer is currently no. Maybe I'm missing something that is gonna be like really important, but I feel like the problems that Lillia has to solve are just much bigger than just like cutely swapping 2 units. You know, it's like this would be maybe decent with maybe Stellarchon Herder. Like maybe we would use this with Stellarchon Herder in a Lillia deck, which by the way should play Silicon Herders, I think, in Lillia decks overall, because the card is just so good, right? But then we could just use Emperor's Divide because it's so much easier to do that. So I don't feel it. I don't really feel this Smoke and Mirrors and as a choice in my deck. Man, we have a lot of Lillia cards over here. Sprite Queen is a 7-drop with 1 power, 6 might. When you play me or at the start of your beginning phase, play a ready 3 might Sprite unit token with temporary to your base. Now, I'm giving it 1 beaver. Like, I don't think this has any place in a Lillia deck, even though it's designed to be in a Lillia deck because of the obvious synergy with the temporary units. And I understand that it delivers you value every single turn, but I feel like in case of a Lillia deck, the value, like a perfect example here of the value that you are getting and you want to have tempo out, is Sprite Fountain. Sprite Fountain essentially is kind of like a mini Sprite Queen, but it can be squeezed in so many more turns, while this one eats your entire turn and only delivers you 3 might in that one moment. Now we can compare it to a Watcher that most likely Lillia will play anyway. So you cannot have both Sprite Queens and Watchers in your deck, you will choose only one. And if you play Watchers, then you're probably gonna play Bellows Breath, because it's such a good combination to like delete stuff in base and so on, right? So why would I play this over Bellows Breath and Watcher in my deck? And even if I do this, like, it doesn't deliver you immediate value apart from pushing with 3 might. That is not worth for a 7-drop, right? So, and it doesn't convince me in any matter. Like, in the future, it doesn't convince me that your legend power is gonna be cheaper every turn. If you're not finishing the game after like pushes like this, it's probably not worth, right? Your Watcher will deliver so much value that it probably will keep you closer to winning the game almost immediately. And Sprite Queen will most likely not do that. Next, we have Sumpworks Map, a 2 energy reaction gear, temporary. When an opponent scores, draw 1. All right, so this is 1 beaver. This is just for multiplayer, and it's like, you know, it's not very good at the same time. So I don't think there's a point in discussing this. This is like for free-for-alls, 4-player bases, and so on. So yeah, next. So this might be a little bit controversial, but I'm giving Zilean a 2 beaver rating. I do understand he has potential. He is a 5-drop with 1 power cost, 5 might. So stats are okay-ish, but not great. Once each turn, if you would play a token unit while I'm at the battlefield, you may play that token and an additional copy of it instead. Now, this effect would be absolutely insane if it would work actually in the base, but it doesn't. It has to be on the battlefield. And then it kinda only works when you have also the blue Leblanc on it, right? Because you want to like keep that behind a wall, like behind a wall of Gallios or stuff like that, right? And other than that, maybe this would make sense if you're capable of creating copies of, like, for example, the Rexes that deal damage when they die at the same time, right? And you create a lot of copies of that. And if mirror image would work during your opponent's turn, maybe yes. But again, he needs to stand on a battlefield. I think he is clunky, and I think he doesn't make much sense in Leblanc, because in Leblanc you just have way more options that are basically better. Like, you couldn't consider Cartus just being a better Zilean. It's a different color, but it works in the base and delivers almost the same value, because the point is to create a value out of the token, right? And the value out of the token is most likely getting the definite value out of it, right? Otherwise, like, okay, it would be nice to have a ready unit that would be able to attack, right? So if you, for example, can copy an opponent's unit with a mirror image while Zilean's on the other battlefield, then you can break the other battlefield basically by just copying one opponent unit, right? So there is some niche usage there, but the problem is you need to have very specific scenarios, and you're putting this 5-drop on the battlefield very defenseless most of the time. So because of that, I think it's niche. And in a Lillia deck, again, you have to stand on the battlefield, and you don't want to do that as a Lillia deck. In a Lillia deck, you typically just leave some meaningless units on the battlefields, and then you just reconquer the battlefields every single turn, and that's the way that you want to set up essentially your win condition as a Lillia. So I don't think Zilean has a place there as well. So because of that, I'm giving him 2 beavers. And if you disagree, let me know in the comments. Blue Sentinel is an epic with 4 energy, 1 power cost, 4 might, has a shield too. Your hold effects for holding here trigger an additional time, and when I hold, add 2 power at the start of your next main phase. It's important that it's on the main phase, because if it would be in the beginning phase, it would get deleted at the end of the beginning phase. So you would not have the power for your main. Anyway, it does give you 2 power for your turn when it's holding. And the holding actually is kind of possible, because 6 might, because of the shield, is actually hard to go through, right? So we could compare this for the purple Vex. The purple Vex costs you 4 energy, is a 4-drop as well, but it has Deflect built in and has a very major effect when something is being put into play. It just instantly gets stunned and cannot attack, right? Essentially. Now, Blue Sentinel also gets you a very powerful effect, but the point of this is to build up your board and essentially is like additional seals, but then they also trigger other hold effects additional time. So in my mind, right now, the only deck that can utilize this would be Ahri. And I feel like Ahri should probably try doing this, right? Because it's the problem is that it doesn't have a deflect. So it's so much easier to destroy this without paying like the cost of destroying a Vex, right? But it could be really good. And it's hard to attack into it because if you're playing this on turn 2, so you move like with, for example, you play the crab or the scuttle crab, right? This has 0 might. You go into a battlefield, you then play Blue Sentinel, and now your opponent has to go in and kill a 6 might unit. Otherwise, you're just building up your power. Now, that's pretty significant, right? You don't have an easy way of deleting that so early in the game. So maybe like a Darius and a seal would enable that because that's a 7 from 5/5 energy, but otherwise you would have to like sacrifice weapons, maybe cleaves, blood rushes or stuff like that to actually push through that potential 6 might. And if that would be any other 2-drop, like for example Mutated Mauser that has tank, then this one is almost unkillable unless it's a direct damage or direct removal being used on Blue Sentinel. So I could see this being played. Overall, I think it's a good card. Probably will not find a lot of space in the deck building right now, but I truly think that this is playable to some degree. And also remember there's a way of converting power to direct like effect as well. So for example, if we're gonna be playing Hextech Anomaly, right, we're gonna be able to convert power into energy, which is also nice, right, because that Blue Sentinel would accelerate the deck, not in the meaning of the keyword, but like essentially we would be able to play more cards because of that, right? So there's maybe something there. And overall, just triggering any auto hold effect that we have with Ahri, that would be great as well. So not saying no, I think it's a decent card. Gato Palace. I'm giving it 1 beaver. I mean, we're gonna talk about it, but I'm giving it 1 beaver. It's a 4 energy gear at the start of your beginning phase. If you have exactly 4 cards in hand and exactly 4 units at a battlefield, you win the game. Discard 1, tap, play a 1 might bird unit token with deflect. So you can play it anywhere when you can, right? Base or battlefield that you control. Now, it gives you an additional win condition, right? But the problem is decks like this, if they work, I don't think they are good for the overall state of the game, right? Because they kind of like to some degree ignore what your opponent is doing, and it's more about how your opponent can interact with you. There are also a lot of hoops to jump through this to actually make a difference. Now, we could compare it, for example, to Assembly Gear, right? So it's both 4 energy gears, and here for 1 discard, we create more units, right? In Assembly Rig, we recycle a card from the graveyard to create a 3 might unit, right? It doesn't have a win condition, but to some degree, Gato Palace has an impact on the board, which, you know, is important because it's first and foremost the win condition, but second point is that you still have an ability to use it, right? So you can filter your hand. I mean, not filter because you discard that card, but you get a usage that is a little bit tempo based. Now, the problem is that your opponent can interact by disrupting a win condition here with both gear removal and with unit removal. So it's so hard to set that up, right? Because you're disrupted by 2 different angles of attack. And then the third one is that you need to have exactly 4 cards in hand. That's also not easy, even with this discard over here, right? So you most likely would have to play a blue and purple to play Invert Timelines, because Invert Timelines sets you up with 4 cards in your hand. But then you have to get 4 units that are gonna be at battlefield at the beginning of the phase. I mean, it doesn't have to be 1 battlefield, so it can be like a 3 and a 1, but they have to be at the beginning of the phase there. So they would score 2 points. Like, I don't see this working at any point, and if it works, and I don't think it's good for the game. So yeah, 1 beaver. Alright, Jhin Meticulous Killer is a 4-drop for no energy, has 4 might. That's already very good as a champion unit, right? It has vision built in, so you're able to look at the top of your card of a deck when you play him. And if you spend 4 or more to play a spell this turn, you may play me for blue instead, so you don't have to pay the power cost. So I'm giving it 4 beavers because he is playable, in my opinion. If you play a Jhin deck, I think he has competition with the red one, depending on which direction of the deck you're going to, right? But overall, like, he is pretty decent. You don't have to play him on turn 2, but you can, and then he's still, like, you know, even if you don't have a spell, you just have a decent turn 2 play, just for paying the 4 energy. But if you play a spell, then you can consider definitely playing power for him, because now you can do card advantage and board presence at the same time, like Console the Past, or the dramatic spell with the repeat to draw a card, to draw 2 cards essentially, which is basically the same outcome as Console the Past, but now you can play also Jhin alongside that. So you're building your board presence alongside card advantage in your hand to have more options in the future. And still vision also builds up the card quality potentially for the next turn. So this in itself is pretty decent. And as I said, I could see a deck that plays both Jhin and Nocturne when you play a blue and purple deck, and then suddenly he is also a kind of a win condition in that type of deck. So I can see him being played, maybe not, you know, a lot, because it's a very particular type of playstyle, but I think it's a good card. And I think this is the only 6 beaver card in this entire blue expansion. Leblanc everywhere at once, 4 energy, 4 might. Your temporary effects at my battlefield don't trigger, and she has the backline, which is the reverse of tank. She gets the damage last. I think this card is phenomenal, right? Now, the thing is, the other Leblanc is so good that she might not be even consideration for the champion unit zone at the beginning, but she is definitely a choice. And depending on the way that you build Leblanc, and I think Leblanc can be built in so many ways that you can play both with the yellow or with the blue one, it is particularly showing how powerful the Leblanc archetype and the Leblanc itself can be. Now, she can be even played in a Lillia deck, right? Because now your temporary things don't die. So now you can build all those sprite units in the battlefield, and they will essentially have a tank. So is she better than the even like normal Lillia champion? Maybe, right? She might be actually better, because now your spirits don't die, and you can just add more and more and more to that battlefield. So I think she's really good and playable in 2 decks, 2 different decks, in Lillia and in the Leblanc deck. Like, copying Gallios and just stacking a battlefield is definitely an option that you can do, and then stacking yourself so you don't lose that one Leblanc, right? She can copy herself. That's one of the most important aspects. And when you copy herself, then it doesn't matter if we have a copy or not, because in most cases, like, they will not get destroyed, right? Once you copy a Leblanc, she will turn off the temporaries at this battlefield. So she will turn off her own temporary keyword, and it will only matter if she's a token, if she will get bounced to the hand, or like from the battlefield, right? So she is really powerful, and she has fantastic artwork, and this has no impact on the scale of the beavers, but I think she's really awesome. And Leblanc is probably the most complex deck that we have so far seen in Riftbound, and I cannot wait to try and build it more, because there are so many things that you can do with this deck. Remember to let me know in the comment which color would you like to see tomorrow in the video, and thank you for watching. If you would like to see any of the live gaming from Riftbound, I do have a VOD category in the YouTube channel, but it's required to have a membership for it to watch it, so maybe you could consider supporting the channel financially this way. But also, they are for free available on my Kick channel. I don't want to get into why it... Anyway, the point is, you can watch them for free on Kick. Anyway, so thank you for watching. See you guys. Bye-bye.